Delighted to welcome to the podcast a member of the Irish Judo team, Eddie McLoughlin. Eddie, welcome to the podcast. How are we?
Not too bad. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Thanks for coming on, Eddie.
And Eddie, listen, can you tell us, for those that have like a vague idea of judo, just a bit of background to the sport itself and some of the basic rules involved?
Yeah, of course. First of all, it's a sport that takes place on the mat, kind of like MMA and wrestling. So you've got a square mat. The fights are 4 minutes long for adults. You get scores in different ways. And at the end of the fight, if it's still level after 4 minutes, you go into golden score. So it basically becomes first score wins. And the different ways you can get scores in judo, like you've got stand up, so you can throw people. If you throw someone flat onto their back with speed and power, you get what's called a nippon, and that's the judo equivalent of a knockout. And then there's groundwork as well. So groundwork would be pretty similar to BJJ. A lot of people are probably more familiar with BJJ. And we've got strangles and arm locks and hold downs on the ground. So you're trying to hold people down for 20 seconds, or else strangle or arm lock them until they either tap out or pass out in some cases.
And tell us a little bit then about how you got involved and what attracted you to the sport first, I suppose.
Yeah. So I started judo in 2008, just after the Beijing Olympics. So my mom's side of the family would be from France, and it's much more popular over there. It'd be kind of one of their top three sports behind cycling and football. So I was watching it on the TV over there and just Googled judo in Swords, which is where I'm from. And it turns out my sister's school just around the corner had a club. So I teetered around with one of my mates. Two of us joined boxing and judo at the same time. He ended up sticking with boxing and I stuck with judo. So yeah, here I am 12 years later, still training. Like I still train in the same club a little bit. It's Swords Judo Club, but it's more of a kids club. So I kind of now at the minute as well, I train in Lusk. Up until kind of pre-lockdown, I was training up in Belfast as well a good bit. And in Portmarnock as well would be the other main club I train in.
So would you find, like, in an Olympic year or just after an Olympic year, your level of interest in people joining a club, do you see it increase tenfold?
Absolutely, yeah. Ireland hasn't had a huge number of people fighting in the Olympics for judo over the last couple of years. So in the last kind of couple of Olympic cycles, like in the 90s, we had a couple of people. So the likes of some of the coaches I've had over the years, Kieran Ward and Keith Goff, would have fought in like the 92 and 96 Olympics. And then over the last while, like we had 2012, we had a girl, Lisa Carney, who fought in the Olympics. And she, like, her journey was great. Next year, well, it would have been this year, but next year for Tokyo, we're probably going to have two or three people fighting in the Olympics, hopefully. Two brother and sister, Megan and Ben Fletcher, and then another guy, Nathan Burns as well. And like, I think if you see once you see out with rowing and sports like that, once you have a bit of success in the Olympics in the sport, it just brings a whole new audience. And I think that if some of those guys manage to get a medal next year in Tokyo, I think you'd have a huge influx. Same way you would have had with the boxing after 2012 and with the likes of Paddy Barnes' medal and things like that. Like, a medal in the Olympics just gets all the newspaper headlines. You get the extra funding as well from Irish sport, from Sport Ireland. So like it brings a lot more money into the sport, a lot more kind of like a viewing audience where on the TV and radio where they wouldn't have been there before.
Talk a little bit about your own journey with judo. So you started with yourself and a mate, like you said, and you went for judo and he went with boxing. So how do you go from there to working your way up to an Irish team? What's involved in terms of competitions? And for those that aren't really aware, are there regular fights, or how exactly does it work?
Yeah, so you kind of, judo's a bit interesting in that, like, it's an individual sport, so you wouldn't have like where in football you might have matches every weekend and things like that. Judo is very much you kind of set your own schedule in terms of competition wise. So at the start, you'll start out with, like, I would have started out fighting the Leinster Open, the Galway Open, Cavan, things like that. Build my way up then to fighting in the All Irelands, the Irish Open, Northern Irish Open, and then finally over to, like, I started in 2008, so around kind of 2013, 14, I started competing in the UK and Belgium and those kind of places. And it's kind of been a steady progression where, like, judo's a bit funny where you can go a long time without getting a medal or getting a win, and you might think that you're not doing great, and then all of a sudden you'll go through a streak of results. Like I didn't win I won the All Ireland Universities in 2017, and I haven't. The next competition I won after that was in March this year. But like I was consistently getting silvers and bronzes the whole way. I was like on the Irish team competing internationally. Like I'd be competing in the UK. I compete in other continents and things like that. But you can go long periods of time without winning a gold medal and not feeling like you're getting great success out of it. But you're still progressing through the ranks. Like over the last couple of years, I've gone through the different belts as well. So I went through, obviously you start in judo as a white belt. I got my first black belt in 2017 and my second one then 2018, I believe. And then I've got my points now for my third black belt as well. So hopefully once things get back to normal and the gradings get back going, I'll be able to get my third degree black belt as well. But like the good thing about judo is that like given that it's so small in Ireland, you kind of have to go abroad to get your competitions in. So like last year was probably the year judo really took off for me. So like I got a silver medal in the All Irelands December 2018, and I got a silver as well then just after that in the Irish Open, Northern Irish Open in early 2019. Those results then they put me on the pathway to start competing on the senior international circuit. So the IGF World Tour is what it's called. So I competed in Bratislava in September, over in Slovakia. And then in November, I went down on a little mini tour of Africa. So we went down to Cameroon and Senegal. And there was a team of, I think it was 5 or 6 of us that went down with a coach, and got to fight in some mad places that you'd never see unless you were doing it through sport or something else gave you a reason to go down. But like it's given me a chance to see places that I never would have seen otherwise.
So tell us a little bit more about those trips. So the group of, say, you mentioned 5. You're going to be in different weight categories, I guess. And is there many other countries involved? Is it like a World Cup gathering, or how exactly is it work? How exactly does it work?
Yeah, Grant. So it's called the 2 I fought in Africa were Continental Opens. So like you'd have them in Europe, you'd have them in Oceania, and etc. So we did the 2 down in Senegal and Cameroon. They were mainly African people who were fighting in it, but there was a couple of guys from Italy and the UK as well who had gone over. And judo is like you do it in it's generally a knockout format unless there's only less than 8 people. So it's a knockout format. You have to keep winning to get through. I fought a couple of guys from, it was Mozambique, Cameroon, that I was fighting, and the strength of the guys down there is very different to what we'd have back here in Ireland. In Ireland and in Europe, it's kind of much more technique based. So you've got a lot of kind of foot sweeps and kind of technical throws. Whereas what I found when I was fighting down there, it's very strength based. Like, so it was kind of a battle of wits to see who could hold on to their stamina longer. Both my fights went the distance. Like one of the fights went, I think 2 or 3 minutes into golden score. And you can imagine the heat was, I think it was 35 degrees or something like that when I was down there. So it's something else. I didn't get a medal now at it, but there was one of the other guys in the Irish team, guy Josh Green, who was in my weight category as well. And he got a bronze medal in the first week both weeks actually. So we had, like, overall the team got good results. I didn't get a result there myself, but it was a great experience. And hopefully now, once this pandemic takes over, if it does, then I'll get a chance to fight again.
I was just going to ask you about, say, if you're fighting someone from Mozambique, would you set up differently to if you're fighting a fella from the UK or whatever? Is that kind of a switch that they've got a little bit more power in that sense? But the UK, you can go a bit more in the technique side of it.
Absolutely, yeah. So like what I found when I was fighting the guys down there, like because it was kind of a bit more strength based, you don't want to really give them the chance to get a good grip and lock you down, because like once they start dominating you, you're not going to get it, because that's their whole training program is built around dominating the other person and just getting the scores by whatever means necessary. So you're doing a lot more kind of footwork, a lot more movement, trying to stay on your toes a bit more, move around, and just once you get the grips, going for the throws straight away, and bringing them to the ground where possible. Because I found, like, with those guys, they were mainly focusing on stand-up fighting. So like the guys I fought, obviously that's a bit of a it's only a small sample. But the guys I was fighting, their groundwork wouldn't have been as technically strong as you'd find in Europe. So I was trying to bring them to the ground where I could and get and work on some strangles and turnovers from there. Whereas in Europe, you're kind of finding that people are generally a bit more well-rounded in terms of like they're good on the ground and they're good standing up as well. So it'll be like, especially when you're fighting the likes of the French guys. I've done a couple of training camps in France, and they're very technique based. Like they'll go foot sweeps all day long. And what I find with them is then I reverse it. So I take on the role of, I try to take on the dominant grips. I try to play the strength game a bit and go for big pickup throws and things like that.
And tell us a little bit in terms of, you mentioned like getting scores and stuff, and you mentioned the judo term for knockout. Have you ever, tell us a couple of stories of how you might have been close to either getting one, or if you had any, have you ever found it a bit dangerous in terms of, when in the heat of a fight, in terms of how dangerous can get between you and opponents?
Yeah, like I suppose people kind of get a little bit reckless towards the end of fights, particularly, because you get smaller points. So like there's an ippon, as I said, is the knockout, judo equivalent of a knockout, but you can get a lower score called a wazari, and you get that for kind of throwing people on their side, or if you hold them down for 10 seconds. So sometimes you get to the end of a fight and someone might have a wazari, so you're losing the fight, but you still have a bit of time left to get a score. So like you have plenty of times where you're just going for big pickups. You're trying to just wrap around someone just to pick them up any way you can. And like I've won, I remember it was I think it was the All Ireland Skills Championships. I think it was like 2012 or something like that. I was in the final against one lad, and he was up. He was a wazari up against me, and literally on the buzzer, I picked him up for a throw and threw him and scored. So like it goes down to the last second, and sometimes like people get wound up. I remember there was one guy from, I won't say what part of the country he's from because other people recognise him, but from out west, and he picked me up for a throw, and I spun around the air and landed on my stomach, so there was no score. And like in judo, you have to be thrown onto your back or onto your side at least to get a score. He threw me onto my stomach. The referee gave no score, and for some reason he just hit me in the back of the head when I was on the ground. And like there's no strikes in judo, but this guy just stood up, wasn't happy with the referee's decision, and hit me a smack in the back of the head. And obviously got disqualified, banned from the rest of the competition. But like some people kind of lose the run themselves a little bit. In fairness, like generally the discipline's really good. Like judo does teach a really good discipline overall, like obviously being a martial art. But you get some people who are like have probably come into it looking at MMA or looking at like maybe more striking sports, and it might not necessarily be the kind of sport they're expecting to be.
You spoke there about getting onto the Ireland team and going on the senior international circuits. How did you qualify for an Olympics then? Or how did you go about doing it? Do you first get in the Ireland team and then move from there?
Yeah, so basically qualifying for the Olympics, it's based on a global list. So it's the world ranking list. So if I remember correctly, it's the top 22 in the world will qualify directly for the Olympics in a weight category. So each weight category is separated out. The top 22, I fight in under 73s. The top 22 people in under 73s globally will qualify automatically. And then the next places then are done based on a continental quota basis. So they try to make sure that each continent is represented at the Olympics. So they put everyone in Europe in one list then based on the ranking points they have, and the top X amount will qualify directly then as well. The Olympics is very, very difficult to get to. Even if you're like another tricky one is like if you're from the likes of Japan or Russia or France, the top judo countries in the world, you're only allowed to have one competitor per weight category in the Olympics. So like I could be number 2 in the world, and if number 1 in the world is from the same country as me, I won't be allowed to fight in the Olympics. And you see that mainly like the likes of Japan have that all the time. So even in under 66 kilos at the moment, you probably like the top 2 guys in the world probably would be, or like 2 of the top guys in the world would both be from Japan, and they're constantly fighting each other competitions. One's beating the other at one, the other's beating the other at the next competition. So Japan then have to go and pick one person to qualify. But like in Ireland, we generally don't have the problem where only one person qualified per category. In Ireland, it's more that we need to get into the top 22 in the world. That's more our problem. But like I said, like there's 3 guys next year, like two guys and Megan, who have a really good shot of qualifying. And you'd be hopeful, like some of the young guys coming through now, like the guys in their early 20s, like Josh Green. There's some other guys like one of my training partners, Barrock. Some of those guys they've got great judo, and like if they keep on the training program they're on now, you'd like to think that they have a great chance of making the Olympics. Really, for me, like I think Olympics is probably out a bit out of my reach, but like I'd be delighted. The Commonwealth Games would be the big one for me. So like there's the Commonwealth Games coming up in 2022 in Birmingham, and my dad's from Northern Ireland, so I'm qualified I'm eligible to compete for them. Again, there's a whole selection process behind it. You have to get good results. You have to be the number one person in Northern Ireland for that weight category. But at the 2022 Commonwealth Games would be my big aim.
Brilliant. And in terms of Olympics, you mentioned the couple of fighters that could qualify. Would there be any realistic medal hopes, do you reckon? Maybe not next year, but say in 4 or 8 years' times that Irish people listen to this that like sport can kind of keep an eye on the judo scene, I suppose, and maybe there could be a potential medal in a certain weight category.
I think like realistically next year, if the draw goes well there's a guy Ben Fletcher who fights for Ireland, and he's like his results have him in the Olympic qualification spot at the moment. And like realistically he's probably going to make it. So he's had some fantastic results this year. Like continental medals and the likes of that. Like you say, he's won, I think it's Grand Slam or Grand Prix medals. If the draw goes his way next year, like you could see him in with a chance for a medal. Like his sister Megan as well. Basically, if the draw goes her way, you could see her definitely in the latter stage of the competition. I think a couple of years down the line, realistically, there's a couple of guys up north like who fight for Ireland. Josh Green and Callum Nash are doing really well. I think like Josh was the one in my weight category who got 2 medals down in Africa last year. And like he trains full time as well. So like as well as doing the studies on the side. But like he's probably if the results go his way and the development keeps going over the next few years, he would probably be looking for Olympic qualification. And obviously once you qualify, like on the day, it's like it's a bit different to football where like if you qualify for the World Cup in football, you have to be consistent then for 3 weeks or 4 weeks once you get there. Judo, it's one day. So like if you get a good day, you get a couple of good fights under your belt, all of a sudden like 3 or 4 fights later you're in a medal match. So like it can go.
It's with 22 fighters. You meant?
So it'd be 30. It'd be around the 32. Yeah. So it'd be top 22 in the world, and then you get a couple of people from the continental quota as well. So usually you have around kind of 30 odd people in each weight category.
So how do other people get involved? You mentioned how you were lucky in the sense that there was a judo club. Is there judo clubs all dotted around Ireland? Yeah,
there's a good few clubs now. There's a lot of them will be kind of based around your main centres like Dublin. There's a good few in Dublin, a good few in Galway, a couple down in Cork and Kerry, and up in the north as well around Donegal, Derry. Like a lot of towns in Ireland now are opening up judo clubs. You're kind of finding some of the senior members. Like some of the senior members who might be assistant coaches in some existing clubs are opening up their own clubs around the place. Like the best place, anyone who's looking to get into it, the Irish Judo Association website, they've got a full list of clubs and all the coaches' numbers and stuff. And a lot of clubs have a heavy presence on social media now as well. Obviously, as you know yourself, that's where everything's going. But there's clubs. Basically, most people in Ireland now will probably not be further than half an hour to an hour away from their local club. And as well, like you be training 2 nights a week. You're not committing to doing you're not committing to doing matches every weekend either. So like it's the sort of thing that even if you're only interested in doing it from a training perspective or dipping your toe into some of the Irish competitions, that's what most people do, to be honest, in Ireland.
And if, for example, if someone sees tennis they've got naturally good hand-eye coordination, it's a sport that will suit them. What's something that if someone wants to get into judo and they have a certain element, what are those elements that, if you're good at this, you could be good at judo?
Yeah, so like the balance thing is really important. So like you find that often people who would have been generally people who do like skiing are often quite good at judo because they've got really good balance. They can shift their weight from left foot to right foot. Often like you're changing direction really quickly. We find people who've kind of done other martial arts as well in the past. Like so if you like a lot of people would have done taekwondo or karate or stuff like that when they were younger, they'll often transition in really well as well. Like generally it's the balanced sports that'd be really good. So like your winter sports, or like people who maybe a lot of guys in judo would be big into surfing as well. So like we've got a lot of guys from Galway would when they're not doing judo, they'd be surfing or they're kind of paddleboard and that kind of thing. And you find that it's the same base. You know, like if you can shift your weight from left to right, you know when to turn in, and you're able to, like, because judo is all about stepping in the right place at the right time and picking people up most of the time. So if you've got any of those other sports, the likes of the water sports, winter sports, that you've got a really good base for judo.
So I was probably thinking it would be more, not necessarily more, but like boxing, MMA, but that type of sports. But you're saying more balance in the winter sports would actually suit.
Yeah, so the boxing one's really interesting because we see a good few guys come in from boxing into judo, and judo is actually the opposite stance. So like in boxing, if you're right-handed, generally the first thing you're taught is stand with your left foot forward, and the first thing you're taught in judo, if you're right-handed, you stand with your right foot forward. So it's the opposite stance. And it takes for the guys who come from boxing or kickboxing and stuff like that, it takes a bit of time to adjust, because like it'd be the same way if they were in boxing and they were told to switch their stance straight away. You see a lot of the top guys in boxing are able to do that easily, but most of your journeymen or people who are kind of only ticking along in boxing, they have their one stance and that's it. So it does take a bit of while for the boxing guys to convert over. And like obviously you can stand the way that you would have been taught in boxing, but unless you've got all your throws, unless you learn all your throws left-sided, you're not really going to have much success. And that's something that I'm fairly guilty of. My coach, anytime I'm on the mat, I kind of I'd be a right-sided fighter, but I often default to standing like southpaw. Sorry, to standing like with my left foot forward, and my coach is constantly at me. Sorry?
Would that be tiredness that would you do that?
It's kind of just convenience as well. Like you find that like if you're standing left foot forward, most of the guys in Ireland will be right-sided stance, so they're often exposed on that side. You can get a grip around the back a lot easier, and like that's something I've actually put into my game. Like I built in a couple of left-sided throws. Like some of the pickups I do now are off the left side, so I'll take a big grip around the back and just pick them up from there. And I've kind of done that because like I may as well add it as a tool to my arsenal, where I find myself defaulting to that position, so I may as well be able to do something from it.
And you spoke there about the virus and the lack of an Olympic this year. How have you found personally training during the lockdown? We were told combat sports would be one of the last to come back. How have you managed your training and sparring in a way, really? So
the judo clubs have been completely shut down now since March. So I fought there in the Galway Open on I think it was like the weekend before Paddy's weekend, and since then there's been absolutely nothing. So I actually work with a company called Sigma Nutrition, and they do like my nutrition programming and my S&C programming as well. So when the whole lockdown thing kicked in, my coach Kieran was giving me from Sigma was giving me a full plan of what to do. So I was going for runs, doing workouts at home. I had a barbell and dumbbells and stuff that I bought years ago, and I took them out from my mom's house to start using them again. We were using things like do you know kind of the resistance bands. I was tying that around we have a pole on our balcony. I was tying it around that and was practicing some judo techniques there. But in terms of actual judo, there's been absolutely nothing since March. I actually did my first session back there last Thursday, and to tell you, I was absolutely gassed. Would be an understatement. It was. There's a big difference in judo between mat fitness and kind of general fitness. Like you can be, and boxers will tell you this as well. Like you can be in the gym going for runs the whole time, but your first actual technical and sparring session back is a whole different ballgame. And it usually takes it like a couple of weeks. Same thing if you come back from an injury. It takes 2 or 3 weeks before you can actually get back into the swing of it and actually be in any way useful, and not just dropping your head and dropping to the ground all the time.
I suppose a good thing, I guess everyone's in the same boat. Final point, Eddie, you speak very passionately about judo. What would you say to people that are interested? I know you've mentioned how to get involved. We're going to link that in the description. But what have you found from the sport that's given you such a, you speak so passionately, as I said. What would you say to people that would like to get involved?
Like, I think especially for people who are thinking who might have kids or stuff like that, or might have kids in the future. Like, it's a great sport to get your kids into from a young age, because like we do a lot of clubs now will do like gymnastics warm-ups, so you're learning a lot of flexibility in terms of in terms of the discipline side. Like, there's a big focus on treating other people with respect, and actually, and not kind of like the whole trash talk mentality that you see in some of the other martial arts. Like, you don't really get that in judo. Like, there's very much like, yeah, we'll fight when we're on the mat, but when we're off it, then we'll go for dinner, or we'll have a chat after. There's no trash talking like you get in some of the, like in the likes of MMA or things like that. And even generally, like, it's a great way to get traveling around to different competitions and give yourself an excuse to go abroad. Like, I've done training camps in the south of France, in Croatia, and in the UK, and it's all like, the judo is an excuse to go away nearly. Like, you get a bit of a, like, obviously you're training hard while you're doing it, but you're getting a couple of days off to relax around it as well. And like, it does give you the opportunity just to see faces you wouldn't see otherwise. And it's a tough sport as well. Like, in terms of the mental side of it, like, between the actual fighting and the competitions and the weight cuts that you do, things like that, like, it's not something that you can kind of just, like, if you want to take it seriously, obviously people can just do the training side, but if you want to actually take it seriously and get to a high level, the mental side is really important, because when you're sitting in the sauna with 500 grams to go and with 20 minutes left before your weigh-in, and all you want to do is get out and have a big glass of water, like, you need to be mentally tough to stay in there.
Eddie, you've been brilliant. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks very much, guys. Cheers.
Thanks, Eddie.